Hello. So, how is everyone doing today? Cool, that's good. Okay, so first, can you please put your phone on silent? And a quick reminder, there's reviews at the end of session. Please fill them out because it let us know how I did. Okay, great. So, thank you for showing up for my talk, porting a real-life castle into your game when you're broke. I'm Joseph, and I'm a technical designer at WordVoid. So, a little bit of background. WordVoid is an open-world puzzle exploration game, and it focuses on historical location of the world, and we try to incorporate the rich history of those locations into our game. So I was working on the Byblos site, and if you're not familiar with that site, it's the home of the Phoenician, one of the most ancient cultures. It's consisted of traders, and it's believed that they invented the alphabet. So the city itself is located in Lebanon, and it's over 10,000 years old. So what's interesting about the location is that multiple civilizations went through it, even the Greek, the Roman, and the Crusades. And speaking of the Crusade, that's when the castle was built using Roman ruins. Now the castle itself is fairly recent, and it's just 800 years old. And I had to scan it for my game. So I was promised a funding that kept being delayed, and I decided to just go out and do it with whatever equipment I can find. And it worked. So this talk is a reflection about why it worked and what I used, and hopefully it will help you scan your own castle into your game. Okay, so the first approach that I took was to draw from reference. So I had a few photos of the castle, and I tried to draw it, and I started to get really decent results, though the problem is it wasn't until a few months later that I realized some dimensions were off. Like, for example, there was a bridge for the castle, and in the game it barely fits one character. And in real life, it also barely fits one character and his horse and his personal marching band, so that was nice. Okay, so that's why I decided to just measure the castle, and so I took a measuring tape and I went there and measured every single rock of the castle. It took me around 2 days, 9 packs of Oreos, and I did it, basically. So yay! Okay, luckily on the last day I just remembered there was an app called 123D Catch, and that app was just grab your phone, take a few photos of an object, and you upload it to the cloud. It will generate a 3D model for you. So I was like, sure, I can take a quick spin around the castle. So I did that, and I used Recap, and I got this blob. So this blob is actually really interesting, because even though I cannot use it in my game, it showed me that 3D scanning is probably a good way to actually approach this. So I started doing some research, and I found out that it's named Photogrammetry. And, well, I got really in depth into the subject. So to be clear, this talk will not cover photogrammetry. It's not an introduction to photogrammetry, though if you're interested about knowing more, I wrote an article called Everything You Need to Know About Photogrammetry, I hope. And you can check it out. Though if you're not familiar with the topic, it's really simple, and it's just taking multiple images of the same model, and if you have enough overlap between your photos, the software will generate a model for you. So I started doing some research, joined some group, and I found the Facebook 3D scanning group, which I highly recommend you join, and it's filled of industry veterans that's more than happy to share their experience. And on that note, special shout out to Jeffrey Ian Wilson, who actually helped me figure out this list of equipment that I needed for my project. And first I needed a DSLR, some accessories, a drone, and a special rig. And this rig is used usually for capturing the environment in order to remove it later in post-process. So let's see how we can actually reduce the cost of every single one of those equipment. First, let's check out the camera. And since the camera is around, well, a decent one for photogrammetry can cost up to $3K, there's actually, you don't need a very expensive camera, and this is a living proof, and this scan is done by Milos Luka, and he's an active member of the Community in 3D Scanning Facebook group. And what's impressive about this scan is not the level of detail he achieved, but it's actually that he used a camera, a DSLR, that's the Canon 550D, which is not one of the highest end cameras. He also used an adjustable lens, and to compensate for the lack of resolution, what he did, he took more photos. He actually took 436 photos of a single door. So, and he used reality capture. So you don't need an expensive DSLR, and most of them will just work. Some people even use their phone, for example. Just save in the highest settings, or save in RAW when possible. If you can't buy it, rent or borrow. And also, you can always post-process your photos, which will help you get better results and will boost the quality. So I used DX Optics. You can use Camera Raw or Lightroom too. So as for the accessories, So fixed length will probably give you a sharper result, but you can use an adjustable one. Just make sure you pick one focal length and stick to it during the entire session of the capture. An SD card, because you're going to need a lot of photos. And this one is actually obvious, but well, before my battery camera never drained, and it wasn't until I went to scan the castle when it did, so always get an extra battery. Luckily, the security guard over there was kind enough for me to let me charge my battery, but I did lose a couple of hours. Of course, you need a tripod and a monopod for more stable images, and the remote. Well, it's $2, so get it anyway. And basically for the remote, well, basically when the camera cannot get to some, when you want to take photos of some areas that you can't really reach the camera, you can use the remote, and it's really useful. As for the drone, it will definitely make your life easier, though I did not use one, and it's because I couldn't afford one. The drone I needed was the DJI Inspire. It cost around $3,000, but now you can get similar result by just getting the Mavic Pro, which is $1,000. So if you can't get one, here's how to probably do a scan without it. And the first thing you want to do is just scan the floor and then go one level over it, scan the second floor, and then take a loop from the second floor where both floors are showing. And if you look at the picture at the top right, you can see both ledges of the two floors showing, which helps the software actually align those floors together. So how do you scan the roof? Because the roof, there isn't anything on top of it. And what you need to do is use ground control points. And ground control points are basically points that you specify manually on multiple images. It will help the software align it. Though, once you have a point on the roof, it's not actually visible from downstairs. So how do you actually find a good reference point? And in my case, I got lucky. There was a pole. I also don't know why there was a pole, but there is one, so yay, that's great. So look for those features. If there isn't any, try to put one, and it will help you manually actually align the roof. Or get a drone if you can. As for the special rig, I did not use one because I don't have Amazon in my country, and it's really expensive to buy one that's already built. So I'm glad I didn't use one, because later at GDC there was a talk called Photogrammetry and Star Wars Battlefront, and they mentioned a technique where they used object space normal map, and basically it's useful for removing the light without any equipment. It will give you similar results, so that's great. So as for the software, since I was using 123D Cache, I looked for the Autodesk solution, and I found something called Remake. And Remake is actually free if you use the cloud, and you can upload up to 125 images. Though if you get the professional version for $30 a month, you can upload up to 250 images, and you can also do some offline processing. So Remake didn't give me a lot of controls on the process itself, and basically that may or may not be something that you want in your project. So I looked for the other software, which is the most commonly used back then, and it's called Agisoft. And Agisoft is only $180 for a license, and it has unlimited amount of photos that can handle. Though actually unlimited with an asterisk, because the more photos you have, the more RAM you need. So if you're going to scan a castle, and imagine you need around 4,600 or 6,000 photos, you're going to need probably around 512 gigs of RAM, and that's going to be a very expensive server. If you want to use a ground control point, you need the professional version, so that's an extra $3,500. So solution can be quite expensive. And that's when I looked for reality capture, and reality capture is 99 euros per month. And it's actually really fast, much faster than reality capture. And what's interesting about it, it can run on almost any laptop or desktop as long as it has an NVIDIA GPU. And it can handle an unlimited amount of photos, no matter the amount of RAM you have. The professional version, the promo version will probably just handle up to 2,500 images, while the yearly license will handle unlimited amount of images. So if you're scanning multiple castles during the year, I would highly recommend you invest in a yearly license. Though if it's a one-time project, then you can also consider Pix4D, which is $350 for 1 month, but it can also give you a similar result. And although all of these software don't give you the same result out of the box, if you invest your time in every one of them, you can actually get the same result just by tweaking some settings. So as for the PC, well, according to my testing, these are the recommended specs that I found out. GPU, well, you can use an AMD, but if you want to use the reality capture, you need an NVIDIA. So NVIDIA is a safe bet in this case. I had some issues with MeshLab for VRAM that's less than 4 gigs, so get one with 4 gigs. For the CPU, you might need i7 or a Xeon. And in order to make that decision, know that i7 is limited to 64 gigs of RAM, though reality capture, for example, prefer faster cores over more number of cores, while Agisoft prefer more cores because you have to disable some of them if you have more GPUs and more RAM. So it depends. As for the RAM amount, I found 32 gigs to be a safe bet. I did find some issues with 16, but most scan will actually work with 16. Unless you're scanning in castles, then this number won't actually really help you in Agisoft, but other software actually works great. As for the hard drive, well, you can get an SSD, but it's really expensive. So just get one that has small capacity to run the software on it, and you can store your photo on an HDD. And the thing with HDD is that it's not expensive, and it will just probably add some time to the first processing layer, which is loading the images into memory. Okay, and please don't use a laptop. I mean, I totally ignored my own advice, and I used my own laptop, actually, because I was broke, but you shouldn't. I mean, okay, also, most of the advice I give, I actually broke all of them, but you shouldn't. Great. So I mentioned that I went scanning the castle and it worked, but actually there was a long period of pre-planning and practicing before that. So if you had never scanned before, start by practicing. For example, for me it was the rock in my living room that I started scanning and took a few images, tried to take less, take more, see what happens. And yeah, then you can ask yourself, how much resolution do I need? Do I really need all the information? For example, if the wall is offsetted by 10 centimeters, are you an archaeologist? Do you need that huge amount of precision? Or are you a game developer and you don't really care? Do you need all the details, or will it be covered in the textures? And those questions will actually define how much photos you will take. You can probably take 6 photos for one wall, or 50 photos for one rock. Okay. So also, you don't have to scan everything in high resolution. Just look for some features like the textures. If you want a texture, focus on that. Some modular pieces, and even in that castle where nothing is modular because it's really old and every piece is not identical at all and nothing is symmetrical, I still found some pieces that are common to the architecture of that time, and I focused on those. So for example, the stairs, the window, or the ceiling. Okay. So for the pre-planning, then you have to imagine how are you going to capture your photos. So first you want to take a huge loop around the castle. So I'm drawing the loop right now, it doesn't update in real time. Okay. And this is the first loop, we'll just cover all the details of the castle and make sure everything is visible in all the photos. Though it's not enough, you have to take a second loop that's closer and covers more details. So 1 second. Okay, and that's a closer loop. Though the thing is, there's a hill over here. So you can't really take photo from here, and you have to climb all the way to this point. Though the problem, there are some spikes, so that was challenging, and it covered most of my field of view. There's also a bridge underneath over there, and some tight passages that you have to also compensate for. And also, not to mention, the sun is not your friend. Even if you're shooting in a cloudy day, a small sun shifting can actually ruin your entire scan. So the better way to approach this is not taking a loop, because taking a loop can take up to 10 minutes, and in 10 minutes the sun can change a lot. So instead you want to scan each element individually. So for example, you scan the first tower, then you scan the wall, then you scan another tower, and you sort it into folders, because just in case that happened, you can always just manually align those elements. But if you took a loop and it doesn't close, then it doesn't gonna work out really well actually for you. So that's something to consider. So as for the interior, and this also works on the exterior, don't take panoramic images. And panoramic images are basically images that you take in place. So don't do that. Walk while you capture the photos, because this will generate a lot of errors. And I took many panoramic images, so just knowing. Okay, so when you want to scan some tunnels, it's really hard to move inside of tunnels. So make sure to grab a photo and then take one step forward, grab another photo, and keep moving on forward. Though if it's a stairs, for example, direction actually matters, because you want to go up the stairs and not down, because you want to see the steps in the photos. Another issue that you might face is dark tunnels, and in this case, some areas can be much darker than the other, and when capturing with the tripod, you can probably change the shutter speed, but that can backfire too, so you have to be careful with this one. But it will help you get more dynamic range and more points to actually align the images. So speaking of alignment, once I captured all the photos, I put everything in reality capture and hit align, and I got a big blob. So the problem is I didn't actually take a screenshot of that blob, and then when I tried to recreate this process just to take a screenshot of it, I got good result. Okay, so I know each software actually improves with time, and that will get me to one point, which is whatever I mentioned right now was taken a year ago. So you have to do your own research because they change a lot. Okay, though there are still some errors, like if you can check out the red areas over there, you can notice that some walls are magically appearing somehow. And the way to fix it is just split it into components. So reality capture has a nice feature when you can align a group of photos, create an element, and then align that element to another element. And that way you can see which photo actually is not working, remove it, and reduce the error. And of course you can save them in organization. Well, yeah, use a naming convention, not like I did. Okay. So, and then whatever doesn't align, you can always use some ground control point and align them. And you can end up with this. And what's interesting about this is that, see those points? This is actually me standing there and taking a photo. So that's around 4,000 photo. That's nice. Okay, and this is the end result. And then you create a polycrunch version and you put it in a game engine, and now your gameplay programmer can actually work on the gameplay while your artist can slowly start replacing the pieces with more better looking one. And if someone was taking notes during the presentation, yeah, I'm sorry, I actually took notes for you and I've written in an article so you can check it out. It's called Scanning a Castle Inside Out with No Budget. Okay, so how much will it cost you? So if I want to scan a castle today, probably I'm going to need a drone around $1,000, a camera, $300, camera accessories, a PC, reality capture, and a Photoshop or the X-Optics. And that will give you a total of $12K. How much it cost me? $70. And the thing is, I did not use a drone. I borrowed the camera. Camera accessories, I didn't actually buy all of them. The PC, I actually won my laptop, and also a huge shout out to Milos, who actually volunteered to process the data for me on his server. So I didn't actually have a processing server. Reality capture was in open beta when I tried it, so I got it for free for commercial use. And the X-Optics, I used the trial. So that's how basically I reduced the cost. And it's about finding opportunities. And how do you find opportunities? Well, if you're at GDC, that's a good step. You can also join the 3D scanning Facebook group, ask a question over there. Go to events, make friends. And for example, if a software doesn't really does it for you, you can just try to contact the developers and try to work something out with them. And always stay up to date. Like for example, if you're following the X-Optics, you would know that they released the previous version for free for the next few days. So that's useful. And okay, great, you scan the castle. Now what? And the thing with castles is that it's 1 billion polygons, so good luck finding a software that can open it. So the first step is to probably to polycrunch it to 15 million in reality capture, because like I mentioned, you don't need that much resolution. Second step, remove all the details. It's really distracting, and it's really tempting to keep everything, but you have to remove it because you're going to become really overwhelmed really fast. And then split the castle into pieces, and then create a schedule. And for example, if let's just say you need 3 days to create one piece, give it 5 days, just in case. Otherwise, you're really going to become overwhelmed. Though you still end up with 2 million polygon piece, and you still have to work with it. And I struggled a lot with that process because I couldn't find a software that can handle the huge amount. And the thing is, you don't have to handle the huge amount. The old method that we still use still work really well. You just need to find a way to translate them into the new polygon. An example, for example, you want to UV a model that's 1 million polygon, and probably 3D Max from why I cannot open the software. ZBrush may or may not actually work, and the best way to do it is just reduce it into a lower polygon, UV that, and subdivide it and reproject the details, and that's actually going to work really well because the small distortions are not really visible in texture. So you can get away with it. And speaking of old method, you can always block your model and remove even more details because they are still distracting and you don't need any of those. And this will help you actually figure out the volumes and which pieces you want them to become modular. And yeah. So if this is your first time doing that, I would highly recommend you perfect the process. So imagine retopology can take up to 2 hours to finish. Okay, so maybe invest a week or two, but understand the process, perfect it, because that's the only way you're going to become better at it. And it's going to become really fast in time. So don't be perfectionist, because no one's going to notice. Basically, that's it. Okay, also invest in your textures. So my castle is made out of rocks. So if I spend 1 month creating this really nice procedural generated shader of rocks, then that's great. It's okay, I can budget that. And if you're interested about the process of doing that, there's also another article you can check out, and it's called The Workflow of Creating Game-Ready Textures and Assets Using Photogrammetry. Okay, so once you become really comfortable with that workflow, you can actually do some interesting stuff. Like they take this European statue, separate the properties of the statue from the properties of the material, and then do some transmutation work and get a Middle Eastern statue. And if you're interested in knowing how I did that, I actually wrote an article, but it's not posted yet. So you have to follow me basically in order to get it. Sorry. Okay, and here's a long list of free softwares that you can check out. And my advice is basically just do it, because it took me around 6 months to scan the castle. Now in my defense, I had to learn everything from scratch, but I could probably have done it sooner if I just went out and do it in the first place. And if you ever actually scan a castle or do something else, remember to take some time to go back to the community and thank them, because probably someone helped you. And speaking of that, a big shout out to my mentor, Nada, the 2 industry veterans, Milos and Jeffrey, our archaeologist, Hassan, and my aunt who let me borrow her camera, Samia. I will also recommend that you join the 3D scanning Facebook group, and a special shout out to the American University of Beirut who sent me to Austria to see a 3D scanning conference. So if you have any questions, you can catch me in the wrap-up room after the talk in the north lower lobby by the elevators. You can check out all the articles by going to my website, WordVoid, and checking out the devlog section. If you have any question, you can post them underneath the blog post, and you can just ask me on Twitter directly, and I'll be more than happy to guide you and set you on the right path. Okay, so yeah, I'm done. Thank you. So, any questions?
So, for your retopologizing, are you using Topogon or what program?
Okay, so I'm actually using 3 softwares, because apparently when you have 3D scanning, you're still gonna find a mesh that has some issues. So sometimes I use Remake, I polycrunch the model, or sometimes I use 3D Max and I also polycrunch the model. I also use instant meshes sometimes, and I will also polycrunch the model and do some retopology and generate a quad mesh, and apparently it's 4. And I use also ZBrush sometimes, and ZBrush has 2 processes, Dynamesh and the Z-Remesher.
Z-Remesher, yeah.
Right, so for Z-Remesher you can just do some retopology, but it's going to become a really low resolution model. Then you have to subdivide it and then reproject the details from the high resolution model, and that's how you get it usually.
All right, cool. Then.
Okay. Oh, and also feel free to use a combination. Okay.
I just wanted to say, if you don't have anyone you can borrow cameras and lenses from, there are plenty of places on the internet that will rent high-end cameras for fairly cheap, and on the order of like $10 to $100 a day. So if you need drones and cameras, that might be an option as well.
Right. My aunt had a camera, so I was like, hey, can I borrow your camera?
Yeah. Just saying, if you don't have an aunt, you know.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Any more questions? Okay, great. Okay, just don't forget to fill out the reviews after the talk, and I hope you enjoyed everything.